one of the things I've learned about people who've run successful organizations, whether they're academic or business, is that they really love mentoring young people. It's an intrinsic pleasure, because you think, well, for the evil capitalist, it's winner take all and to hell with everyone else, and that's an unbelievably cynical view of human nature. It only really applies to people who are genuinely psychopathic, and they're very rare. And so most of the people I know that have been hyper successful are absolutely thrilled if they can find a young person, and they don't care, generally speaking, about sex or creed or color or any of that crap. They care about competence. They want to find a competent young person who's got a lot of possibility, and then open up all sorts of doors of opportunity for them, and to see how they can help them develop. And if they can do that with 20 or 30 people, then, like my graduate supervisor had his he's getting old, and he had his retirement party about 2 years ago, and about 30 of the people that he trained into becoming scientists came to his party, and they talked nonstop about the beneficial effect that he had on their life. He found a lot of them were, they were young and smart, but weren't really all that properly oriented in the world, and he picked them out and gave them opportunities, and he certainly did this for me. Has opened all sorts of doors for me, and that was a huge source of pleasure in his life. I think maybe the primary source. He had a family as well, and obviously his family was of primary importance, but in his professional career, it wasn't his name on papers and his name in the marquee. It was all these young people whose careers he could foster. It was a never-ending source of satisfaction.
Yeah, I think that's a critical aspect of being a successful person, that you have to realize that there's a great personal benefit in helping other people, and that you feel this. This is not just like something that looks good on paper. When you can show some young person who's coming up the way, you're 10 years ahead of them, and you can say, these are the mistakes that I made.
Yep.
I can help you get through this. And then you see them flourish. There's a great deal of personal satisfaction.
Oh, definitely.
And there's got to be some sort of an evolutionary benefit to this kind of behavior.
That's part of, that's the thing is, we are evolved for reciprocity.
Yes.
We really are. We're not evolved for power.
Right.
This is what's so deeply wrong about the damn postmodernists and the Marxists, is that isn't what first of all, power is not the best strategy to attain success. It's simply not. It doesn't even work for chimpanzees, because the brute chimps, the ones that rule purely as a consequence of force, as soon as they weaken two subordinates that are reciprocally engaged, so that have a friendship, tear them into pieces. So I don't care how strong you are. 3 guys that are like 2/3 your strength are going to take you out. So you're much better situated in society and in your life if you're in an interactive network of reciprocally beneficial relationships. That works in games, but it also works in life. And to reduce that, and if you're competent, so there's the killer combination: hypercompetence and the capacity for genuine reciprocity. That makes you unstoppable.
Why is there this lack of understanding and appreciating this nuance in people that oppose these ideas? Like, what's the willingness to be ignorant about all the variabilities, especially when you consider the bulk of the research?
Well, I think some of it's justification for failure. Like if you're not doing very well, then it's really easy to think that the game is rigged. It's also easy to be resentful about people who seem to have more than you have, especially if you're not thinking about it very clearly. And that's another thing that I've been trying to lecture to people about, is that you should be very careful about assuming that someone else has more than you do. I mean, one of the best predictors of whether someone has money is how old they are. So old people are richer than young people. Well, obviously, right? Because they had their whole life to accrue wealth. It's like, well, who's got it better? You want to be rich and old, or young and poor? You can't buy youth with money. So it isn't obvious who's better off in a situation like that. In fact, I think most people who are old and rich would trade it for young and poor fairly damn quickly.
Well, that's why people really get angry when they see young rich people.
Yeah. I know, that's just too much to bear.
Yeah, like a young, rich, famous rapper. Like, what's that fella? The 17-year-old? Lil Pump. How about that? Famous, 17.
But I
was in high school when I was 17.
Well, the funny thing too, though, is that even with people who have that sort of, let's call it good fortune, independent of their talent, you don't have to scratch beneath the surface very far, even in successful people's lives, until you find a pretty decent vein of tragedy. And so that jealousy of the successful is also based on a really unidimensional view of exactly what constitutes success. You see the trappings, whatever they might be. Let's say it's a yacht and more money than you know what to do with, and you assume, well, that's going to put that person at the pinnacle of a satisfying life. But there's no shortage of dreadfully unhappy and addicted celebrities. And it isn't obvious always that more money is good for people. You say, oh, that's a problem I'd like to have. It's like, look, fair enough. There are worse problems, but celebrity and fame and fortune are also not that easy to deal with, and they come with their own pitfalls. Plus, there's lots of things they don't protect you against. People still get divorced, and they still get sick, and they still die, and their parents still get Alzheimer's, and all of that. Like the fundamental tragic elements of life are still in place.
One of the interesting things about people that are jealous of other people that are extremely successful is that you're missing one of the core lessons of competition. One of the core lessons of competition is to be inspired by those who are more successful and not to try to chip them down and take away their accomplishments because they don't make you feel good.
Yep.
The people that are piss poor at competition are always the ones that are trying to diminish the accomplishments of those who are extremely successful. You see this in sports fans. If you see a loser, fat sports fan talking about what a piece of shit LeBron James is because he dropped the ball or he missed a shot, the extreme reaction that they could have to someone who's extraordinarily successful is almost always in direct proportion to how much of a failure they are in their own life. And that's one of the reasons why, in contrast, it looks so ridiculous.
Yeah, well, that's part of the danger. I would say that's part of the danger of the entire identity politics movement is that that reasonable care for the dispossessed, which we already talked about, is easily contaminated by hatred and resentment for people who are not only successful, but who are the most annoying person who's successful is the person who deserves it, not the person who doesn't deserve it. Because you can write the person who doesn't deserve it off.
Right, the lottery winner.
You can say, oh, yeah, well, he just got lucky.
His money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But then you see the person who's broken themselves in half and, come out of a really pathological background and has been successful. And you're uselessly wasting your life away.
Yes.
That's the sort of person that you really don't like because they cast you in a very dim light.
So this is where competition is so important because the person that has a background in competition, has been involved in competition, sees a person who's busted their ass and become something really extraordinary, and it's incredibly inspirational. And you look to those people and you want to read their biographies, and you want to watch documentaries on them because it literally gives you fuel. Whereas the person who shies away from competition, is afraid of their own insecurities and failures, and really has never tested themselves, those are the ones that find these people extremely distasteful because when they put themselves in comparison to these incredible people, they come up short.
Yeah, well, every ideal,
excuses.
Right. Every ideal is a judge.
Yes.
And so what's the answer to that? No ideals. That's a stupid suggestion.
Either.
No, it certainly doesn't, because then it leaves people without any meaning in their life. So
well, I think it speaks to what you were talking about earlier, that we need adversity. That we need adversity, we need difficulty, we need struggle. You need a weight to carry. And if you don't have any of this, you do not get your character tested. You do not advance in your own perception of who you are in this world and how you engage with all the other people around you.
You don't call out what's best in you.
Yes.
And then you can't live without that.
Yeah.
You need that. And the trick seems to be that voluntary acceptance of the adversity. See, that's one of the things that I think is core to the mythos of Christianity, because there's an idea that you should pick up your cross and stumble uphill. And that's really what that means, is that you set your eyes on some high level vision, the city of God on the hill, whatever that happens to be, and then you take the burden, whatever burden you're capable of lifting, which is obviously going to be a burden of suffering, at least to some degree, and you carry that voluntarily. That's the trick, and then you say, well, you need a purpose in your life. It's like, well, look, there's a lot of problems around you in the world. You have some problems even that bother you, right? Personally, they seem to call out to you, those problems. Maybe those are your problems. Those are the problems you should solve. And those, I think, are the call to adventure. It's like, there's a problem. It bugs me. Okay, do something about it. That's your problem.
There's a certain amount that you could tolerate. I mean, I think it's like weight training. There's a certain amount where it becomes detrimental,
Yeah.
where you've overtrained,
Yeah.
your body's breaking down. There's a certain amount of problems that you have in your life that are extremely beneficial.
Yeah.
Because through going through these problems, sorting them out, you build your spirit, you build your character. And if you don't accomplish anything and you never encounter any problems, you are this gelatinous, soft, atrophied soul, and you don't have the intestinal fortitude or the spirit or the human potential has not been developed to the point where you can overcome adversity. The only way to overcome adversity is to face it.